It is an honor to welcome here today Michael Huerta, Administrator of the Federal Aviation Administration. He was sworn into office on January 7th, 2013 for a 5-year term. Administrator Huerta's bio states that he worked to redefine the FAA's regulatory relationship with the aviation industry through increased collaboration and widespread collection and sharing of data. From a personal perspective, I can tell you that he has more than worked. He has succeeded. And in fostering a culture in which the industry works in concert more than ever before to move aviation safety in the right direction. Under Administrator Huerta's leadership and by working through and together as stakeholders, our industry shares information and takes advantage of open lines of communication to achieve concrete results in making a safe system even safer. We also applaud the Administrator's support of the Flight Operations Quality Assurance Program, the Aviation Safety Action Program, the Aviation Safety Information Analysis and Sharing Program, so that we do even more to collect and use data safely, to proactively detect and address risks before accidents occur. Administrator Huerta, ALPA appreciates your commitment to consistently inviting labor to the discussion and debate as our industry continues to collaborate on advancements in many areas of safety, including our joint work to implement NextGen. We commend the FAA's continued efforts to make certain that safety comes first as UAS are integrated into the airspace. So now it is my pleasure to introduce the FAA Administrator, Michael Huerta. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael. Well, good afternoon, and Tim, thank you so much. It's great to be here once again at ALPA's Great Safety Session. You know, I know there's peril in being the very last speaker of what has been, I understand, a very productive conference and a lot of really interesting discussions taking place. And so I appreciate the opportunity to spend a few minutes, share a few words with you. You know, a role of the FAA Administrator is to serve as the ambassador for aviation safety. And I always enjoy visiting with groups and organizations who are passionate about coming to work each and every day with such a singular purpose as ensuring the safety of the traveling public. Now, for those of you who grew up as a child of the space race, as I did, I think it's only appropriate to recognize that today marks a very important anniversary. 48 years ago, on July 20th, 1969, was the first moonwalk. And with those steps in the gray dust of the moon, Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin fulfilled the goal set forth by President John F. Kennedy only 7 years before. And to get there, the brightest minds in the world had to invent an entirely new science, an entirely new way of thinking about how we solve complicated problems. They used everything they knew about mathematics, everything they knew about physics, and they put them all together in ways that had never really been imagined before. And I think about that when I look back at how far commercial aviation has come during the last couple of decades. I'm sure all of us remember a time during the 1980s and the 1990s when the headlines were dominated by news coverage of aviation accidents. Even today, many of us can list those accidents from memory. They carry a lot of weight in our minds, and they're a somber reminder of lessons learned at too steep a price. And many of us remember that the White House set an ambitious 10-year goal in 1997 to reduce the commercial risk by 80%. And everyone was pretty skeptical that this industry could succeed. In 1998, we formed the Commercial Aviation Safety Team, which was the first real effort at putting aside competitive agendas for the common good of the industry. And like the teams at NASA, who invented the science of traveling outside the orbit of the Earth, this industry got together and turned safety for the first time into a real science. We all know that during accident investigations, the ultimate goal is to find that elusive golden BB, the one piece of evidence that tells us exactly how it happened. Well, that golden BB of safety analysis turned out to be data. Lots and lots of data. And through the safety team, which we all collectively know as CAST, the industry and the government began to share all kinds of data, looking for ways to identify and to mitigate risk before it leads to serious incidents or accidents. Now, this was a great leap of faith back in the 1990s on the part of labor organizations, the airlines, we in government, because what we all had to do was set aside some mutually held and very strongly held suspicions of the motives and intentions of one another. But we began to share data from voluntary safety reporting programs like ASAP, like FOQA, as well as the details of incidents, safety issues that otherwise would have gone unreported. And we all know that by 2008, CAST had succeeded in reducing the commercial fatality risk rate by not 80%, but 83% through the voluntary adoption of safety enhancements. Now, this didn't capture the public's attention like the Apollo program did in the 1960s. But during that 10-year period, between 1998 and 2008, I think it's fair to say that the commercial aviation industry succeeded in a moonshot of its own. Because had we done nothing, we would be experiencing a serious incident or accident every 2 weeks now, based on just the sheer amount of activity in the system. But as we all know, the work is never done. We must never stop looking at ways to make the system even safer, and that's why you're all gathered here this week. The question for us all is, how do we identify risk, and then how do we drive it into the world's safest transportation system? And how do we make something which some would call nearly perfect, well, how do we make it even more perfect? And fortunately, the answer, I believe, lies in that same collaboration between government, labor, and industry that was responsible for the remarkable success of CAST. Throughout the industry, we're enjoying a level of collaboration that we could only dream about in 1997. The disciplines enshrined by CAST have led to an evolution throughout the industry, and in fact, they are a model for other industries that are trying to figure out how to improve safety. This data-driven, open, and continuous safety conversation has fundamentally reshaped the safety culture at carriers. It's fundamentally reshaped our culture at the FAA, particularly in how we have to address and how we have to carry out our role as regulators. Now, all of us, whether you're in a company, whether you're in government, whether you're part of a labor organization, we all understand that we must achieve even deeper levels of trust and transparency if we're to reach the next big goal of reducing risk by another 50% by 2025. Now, today, airlines and other operators across the world have embraced the concept of robust safety management systems in identifying and in mitigating risk. And whether you're operating an airline with a fleet of 600 planes or a Piper Cub out of a county airport, we can all benefit from the principles of a safety management system that's tailored to our unique operation. I mentioned a minute ago that the FAA's culture is evolving. And during my tenure at the FAA, I've stressed the importance of doing everything that we can to become a smarter regulator, an agency that moves closer to the speed of industry rather than at the speed of government. Now, a key part of that has been to adopt a risk-based decision-making approach so that we can better target our oversight of safety and compliance. And even a couple of years ago, as airlines were adopting safety management systems, the FAA adopted a new compliance philosophy that drives our oversight of air carriers and others that we regulate. It was founded on the idea that we can achieve more rapid implementation of safety improvements by working with industry to identify and to correct problems in the system. Our goal is very simple. How do we mitigate risk, and how do we ensure positive and permanent changes that will benefit safety? The FAA is using our own target data to target where safety risk and potential problems may emerge. And then we're focusing on addressing these precursors before they manifest themselves in an incident or in an accident. Now, this philosophy is founded on the assumption that everyone in the industry wants the same thing. They want the system to be as safe as possible. And so far, the results are positive. We're finding that the time spent to address, correct, mitigate problems through voluntary compliance is much more effective than the time that might be spent contesting an enforcement action. Since the program began 2 years ago, we have cut the number of enforcement actions by over 50%, but we've identified about 9,000 safety improvements that we have been able to implement, and the system is better as a result of that. Just a few weeks ago, I signed an order that clears the way for the next step in the evolution of our oversight. We recognize that we have to use data to drive our oversight if we want to be efficient and effective regulators. And so this integrated oversight philosophy matures the industry. We see oversight based more on the risk of their operations, and therefore a reduction of oversight of less risky, lower risk operations. We heard from many of you in the industry that it was possible under the old structure for an operator to get a knock on the door 3 days in a row from 3 different FAA offices, all looking for the same information. So our goal is to improve our collaboration and coordination internally so that we're able to come to you as a single, unified agency. We want to foster a proactive approach to safety management that allows airlines and others that we regulate to identify and disclose safety risks. That's not new, but what we want to do is attack it with a new energy and prevent regulatory noncompliance and ensure that we can fix things and ensure that safety is not compromised. Where appropriate, we will use compliance actions for correcting unintentional regulatory noncompliance. Now, as with any change in approach, this transformation in how we do business takes some time to filter through our large and diverse workforce. But again, the data supports that this approach works, and that's why we have to continue to make it happen. Since the FAA began its new compliance approach 2 years ago, the more open environment has resulted in even greater levels of data sharing. And according to our aviation safety organization, this ongoing conversation has, as I said, identified thousands of potential safety issues that have since been evaluated and mitigated. Now, if you're like me, I know that your friends and neighbors think that you're the life in the party when you talk about how great it is to crunch the data and see where it leads us in identifying risk areas in aviation. I imagine when you show up at a backyard barbecue and talk about the latest SIS analysis, and you're the life of the party. It's sort of like listening to the astronaut talk about the formula for calculating trajectories. Yes, it's important, but wouldn't you rather hear about the spacewalk? Well, in aviation, the average traveler just wants to know that we are doing our job and that their flight is as forgettable as possible. Passengers want to board an airplane with minimal hassle. They want to cruise as safely and uneventfully to their destinations, and they want to do it on time. And we do that with amazing regularity, tens of thousands of times each and every day. Now, how we achieve this probably isn't as important to them as the fact that they no longer have to worry about safety beyond the flight attendant's pre-flight briefing. The mechanics of how we do our jobs day in and day out might not be all that exciting to your average road warrior, but the results are worth heralding in bold headlines across the top of any front page. Think about it. In the United States, we have not experienced a fatality in commercial passenger operations since February 2009. That is an amazing achievement. And I see a few of you are resisting the urge to knock on wood. Go ahead, I'll do it too. We all know that this safety record is only as good as each individual takeoff and landing. Safety is intentional. It requires dedication. It demands that we're constantly challenging the conventional wisdom to look at everything we do, even though we might have looked at it 1,000 times already. Certainly, the way I look at the FAA's performance measure, it's pretty straightforward. At the end of any given day, I want to see the same number of landings as takeoffs. And fortunately, that's what the dedicated professionals in this industry are focused on each and every day. I'll give you an example. The industry's joint data sharing program, ASIAS, is helping us to connect the dots across the industry to stop emerging trends in their tracks. Not long ago, a single operator shared a safety issue as it observed its own operations in ASIAS. And ASIAS looked into the broader data repository that covers everyone and identified enough takeoff misconfigurations of flaps and slats that they were occurring across multiple operators and that it warranted broader action. So in a very short time frame, ASIAS, working in collaboration with CAST, helped issue a safety alert for operators to raise awareness of the risk across the industry. CAST identified a detailed study and adopted the safety enhancements to help mitigate the risk of these events. I'm encouraged that this same type of safety risk analysis is starting to take place across the airline level and between some carriers and our certificate management offices. Delta Airlines and Alaska Airlines have both increased their collaboration with their CMO to include open sharing of data on safety issues that have arisen. It's an ongoing conversation in a non-punitive environment, but it's aimed at one very important thing. How do we spot trends? How do we spot issues that might arise with a particular carrier or the way it operates a certain fleet of airplanes? And this interaction is fascinating to watch because you see safety risk analysis as it plays out in real time. I think it's important that each of us be in contact with our carriers to find out more about their experiences. And ultimately, I'd like to see this kind of relationship develop at all airlines and all carriers. It's the next step in how we share and how we evaluate data. And I recognize that each airline is different, and of course, each of our CMOs is different. But as I mentioned earlier, that's something we intend to address under our new oversight philosophy as we seek to provide seamless and consistent interactions with you that are flying the line every day. Now, before I go, I'd like to take a moment to say thank you. Thank you for the support that you have shown. Also, the endless supply of free advice that I have received from many of you, whether I am on board or in my office, that I've received from Alpha and its members during my tenure here at the FAA. There's obviously a lot of work that we have to continue to do before my term expires in January and beyond. But when I come to work each and every day, I feel honored to play a role in contributing to an aviation system that traces its roots back 114 years to a sand dune in North Carolina. And the progress, if we think about where we were and where we are, the progress has been nothing short of amazing. And that is a direct result of the great work that you do and the partnership that we share across the whole industry. So I wish you all continued success, and thanks again to your dedication for making this the safest aerospace system in the world. Thank you.